Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome. We're going to get started because our streaming congregation, audience is already tuned in with us. Our speaker is on, he is actually in the room, but I wanted to welcome everyone who's in this room and also everyone streaming. We're thrilled to have you all. If you, perchance, are not on the mailing list to receive an email blast from me every Thursday announcing what's going on in this room and what's going on in the worship room, we would love to have you sign a clipboard over here which has green sheets of paper and give us your name and address. We don't need it if we already have it. And if you're streaming, all you have to do is write me and tell me you want to be on my mailing list, and bam, it will happen. It's just so wonderful. I want to remind everybody that at All Saints Church, we believe that our Sunday experience is made full and complete by the Monday experience of being politically active. Today, we focus everyone's attention on the state of the planet, particularly what's going on in Porter Ranch, California. We were wanting to write a letter to President Obama and the EPA, asking them to set new limits on methane emissions from oil and gas facilities, such as the one leaking in Porter Ranch, which has released 85,000 tons of methane pollution into the environment. Please visit the action table on the lawn and sign on to this important letter. We'd like to talk about politics and money here at All Saints Church. We would love to have your money. If you like what's going on at All Saints Church and you're not a pledging member, you can make that change right this second. You can just write me a note and say, Ed, put me down for $10,000, $50,000, $100,000 this coming year, or $10. I sign thank you letters for $10 pledges. That's cool. And give me your contact information. You're a member of this place. We have books on sale. Our speaker is here ready to sign your book, not to be missed. 54 favorites from a lifetime of film. Now let's get on to the business. It is Ken Turan Day at All Saints Church. The Archbishop of Canterbury has yet to recognize this day in the liturgical calendar. That ain't never stopped us from doing the right thing. I'm very thrilled that Ken is here, and also sad that this is my last chance to introduce him as the rector of All Saints Church. But he has been one of the great delights, a glory attack in my 21 years here. It is always a thrill to be around him, whether he's speaking here in this forum or being around him and his wonderful wife, Patty. Is she with us today? Don't know. Hey, Patty. Great photographer, best photographer in the history of photography. And most of the world knows that Ken is the film critic in residence of All Saints Church. He does have to have a paying job, so he works at the LA Times and for the NPR. But I absolutely love him. He and I are friends at the heart because he is a worshiping member of Leo Beck Temple. He's a prophetic Jew, knows about mysticism always resulting in social change, believes in social action, inclusion, justice, and peace. And he always finds a way to weave that into his critiques. So, without further ado, will you warmly welcome our lovely, wonderful, smart friend, Ken Turan.
Thank you. Wow. Whenever Ed introduces me, I always say, who is that person? I want to meet that person. Sounds like a great person. But seriously, I feel one of the things I was thinking in preparation for this is how at home I feel at All Saints and how, it feels so much like a homecoming every time I come here. So thank you all for making me feel so welcome here. It's always a pleasure. I wanted to, as usual, I will make a few small remarks, and then I mostly like to answer questions. What I wanted to talk about today, because I know if I don't talk about it, someone will ask a question about it, and I might as well talk about it. And again, I'm not sure. It's about the whole issue of the Oscars and diversity, which has been a big story, and I'm in the process of writing something about it. So I'm still kind of gathering my thoughts, but I had some points I wanted to make. Again, this has just been kind of really interesting situation in a lot of different ways. I mean, in some ways, again, I think about this constantly because I have to write about it. And one of the things I thought about literally this morning is that, and again, this is probably overstating it, but what's kind of going on is kind of like a revolution. And revolutions are messy and complicated. I'm a history major, and I've read about the French Revolution a lot, the Russian Revolution. They're kind of, they don't go in kind of neat, orderly steps. I mean, the first thing that has to be made clear, which is the most obvious thing, but again, I want to make it clear, the notion of more diversity in film is essential. I mean, this is not a debatable point for me. I remember one of the things I always think about when I think about this is when I went to a film festival in Burkina Faso in Africa, and talking to the people there, to the directors and to the head of the festival, about people, viewers all over the world, people are hungry to see their own image on the screen. Everyone wants to see this everywhere. And, not only is it good for those people, as viewers, it enriches us to have more stories to be able to see. So I think the notion of more diversity in Hollywood is critical. And, this is the area that everything is moving towards. But, what's interesting is where this current push came from. It came from because of what the Academy did. And as you know, from the talks that I've given here, the Academy is a very idiosyncratic place. They're always picking odd people. They're always leaving people out who should be in there. So, but in this year, in a year, in the Black Lives Matter year, in years of all this turmoil that's happening in the rest of society, this became unacceptable. And everyone really said, this has gone on long enough. But, one of the things that happened, and that's one of the chaotic things that happened, is that in everyone's anger, the notion you started to feel in the cosmos, kind of this notion that the Academy was a racist organization for leaving people of color off this list. And, there are problems with that kind of formulation. For one thing, as many people emailed me, the actors list is only chosen by members of the acting branch. So there are 6,000 people in the Academy, 1,000 people made those acting choices, and everyone in the Academy felt tarred by this brush. They were not happy. Again, this is the messiness of kind of revolution. And also the real problem, the heart of the problem, as people have said, I mean, nothing I'm saying here is really that original, because people have been thinking about this, talking about this a lot. The heart of the problem, as people like Spike Lee, everyone else has said, it's the business. It's Hollywood that is not inclusive, that doesn't have executives who are putting forward a more diverse slate of films. So the Academy is really, aside from being always quirky, the Academy is just picking from what is there, and there should be more stuff there. So the way the problem will ultimately be solved is if the system changes, if the studios get more inclusive. But, the Academy, to its credit, even though they're not the source of the problem, the Academy said, we're just going to lead. The Academy said, we're just going to do something. So they have put forward, as you know, if you're interested in this, there's going to be a new system, and they're trying very hard to have, more people of color and more women, which is also a key underserved element in the Academy. And, but also as part of that, one reason I thought of it as revolutionary is that older people are going to be pushed out. And I'm not sure about that. Like I say, that's what made me think it's, if you read about the French Revolution or the Russian Revolution, I mean, a lot of people needlessly died. Forget losing your voting privileges, So, this is I think it's a very fascinating, complicated situation that's moving in the right direction. I think what the Academy did is moving in the right direction, even though, again, I'm not so sure about what it did with older voters. I have to look more closely because they were nervous about it, and they have a very complicated system to decide if you're an older voter, if you can stay in or not. So I want to look at that more closely. But it's been fascinating to see, this kind of change happening and more change hopefully in the future. And hopefully, I'm choosing to be positive about this. And I think that things are moving in a good direction. And God willing, they'll keep moving and they'll move faster. And I guess that's it for that. If there's more clarification that people want, I'll be happy to give it. I wanted to say briefly, since I guess this is nominally about the Oscars, I want to talk briefly about, some of the key categories who I think is going to win. There's one key category that is, for the first time really in human memory, no one really knows who's going to win Best Picture. I think it really, for me, when I say for me, I don't mean the ones I like, but the one, I try and keep what I like totally out of the picture because it blurs your thinking, if you will. But I think it'll either be The Big Short or Spotlight will win Best Picture. And which one it'll be, I really don't know. It may become, we've still got a couple of weeks, it may become clearer. But those seem to be the two that I think, look to have the momentum and the reasoning behind them. Best Actor, everyone thinks will go to Leonardo DiCaprio. It's a strong performance. He's in the right position to win. He's been around for a while. He's never won. It's a powerful performance. It's a problematic film for me, but it's a strong performance. Brie Larson in Room seems to be the odds-on favorite. It's a really strong performance, and it's a very tough film. I was talking to someone about it beforehand. It's a very tough film, at least initially, to endure, but by the end, I think one of the things I felt about it is that this is a film that at a certain point within the first 15, 20 minutes, I just wanted to leave. I just wanted to go out. How many people have seen it? Who's seen it here? Good. I wanted to leave because I hadn't read the book. I had no idea what was going to happen, and I'm not going to give anything away here, but I really wanted to leave. I said, I can't take this anymore. I said to my wife, we're getting out of here. But, I'm a professional, so I stayed. And I'm glad I stayed. I'll leave it at that. I'm glad I stayed. So I would encourage people to go. I've talked to a lot of people who were wary about going, and very few of them have said, I think none of them have said they were sorry they saw it. By the time it's over, I think, you'll be happy you're there. Best Director, I think, will go to, I'm guessing it'll go to George Miller, actually. I wouldn't have said that. This is a slot. This is funny. This is, again, talking about the Academy making quirky choices. Everyone thought Ridley Scott would win this, and then he didn't get nominated. So that's a tough barrier to overcome. Even faith won't take you over that barrier. But I think in that kind of spirit, the fact that George Miller is a veteran, he's made a lot of great films. Not only the Mad Max films, he made Babe, Pig in the City, which is you couldn't believe the guy who made Mad Max made Babe, but it's. So I think just it's going to be kind of a career. Mad Max is an exceptional piece of filmmaking, and I think it's going to be like a career achievement award. So I think I will vote for. My guess is that it'll be George Miller. And I think I'm going to stop talking. I like answering questions, so I am ready. I think I'm ready. One reason I like it here is I'm never quite sure what I'm going to be asked. So I hope I'm ready.
Okay. First question, we'll get the mics to you as soon as please. Can you stand up and yell, and we'll repeat, okay?
Yeah, no. I mean, in fact, I was in a rush to get to All Saints this morning. I live far away. I haven't read it yet, but there's a big piece in the LA Times this morning by a critic named Stephen Farber who makes exactly that point. I think it's a valid point. We go all the way back to Brokeback Mountain, where really quality films have just not gotten the recognition. Repeat the question. It's whether we should say Oscars so straight instead of as well as Oscars so white. That gay-themed films don't get the real recognition that they should. And I think that's, it's hard to argue with that. Where that comes from is impossible to say. As I say, the Academy makes quirky choices, and I just, it's just unfortunate that that happens, because I loved Carol. I thought Carol was a terrific film, you know, and I was sad that it didn't get more nominations. And it's also, you know, there are people who say it's a little bit of a cold film, and that may have hurt it. Didn't bother me. I don't consider it cold, but I've heard that from people. I don't know. But I wish it had gotten more nominations. I think it's a terrific film. Carol, yeah.
Yes, I saw Room, and it was interesting how many of you saw it too. It was so unbelievably painful. It was just difficult, but I stayed. It was like 12 Years a Slave. I had to see it. And I know this from a book, and it's probably based on truth, and we see this and hear this in the media. But my question to you is, that acting by that little boy and Brie Larson was superior. And why can't that little boy be not, in your experience, be nominated over DiCaprio, who was just running around with a beer thing on, and
You are tough.
grunting?
You're tougher than me.
All he did was grunt. Okay, anybody can grunt and run around and look dirty on a set. So why wasn't the little child whose name escapes
You know,
me?
again, the Academy, you know, kids have been nominated. Tatum O'Neal was nominated. Patty Duke, I think, was nominated, you know. Why they didn't nominate him, I don't know. But I agree that it's a remarkable performance, and I want to tell you an anecdote that I met the director, Lenny Abramson, at some event, and we were talking about the film, the director of Room, and we were talking about this. Jacob Tremblay is his name, who's the little kid the film, who's a remarkable, I mean, what everyone likes about him is that this is a kid, this is not a kid playing a kid. There is real acting going on in this performance. And if you see the film, you'll know what I mean. There's stuff he does that you just have to be an actor. And the director had a wonderful phrase. He said he felt like, in what working with this kid was like, Jacob Tremblay, he said, I feel like I was the first person to put a golf club in Tiger Woods' hands. And I think that's just a great, great image, you know, because he is a natural actor. And what will happen with him is anyone's guess. But the ability there, no, absolutely good enough to be nominated. Why they didn't do it, who knows? It's 1,000 people, you know, they'd do anything.
You talk about diversity. Well, I don't know why there isn't more people who are, let's see, white, short, and bald. I mean, let's talk about diversity.
You have anyone in mind?
I always feel discriminated because, you know, all my life I was bald, and all the actors who were successful all had a load of hair compared to me. I think there's discrimination. Where's my vote? You know? Thank you.
Yes. Hi. I just want to be very quick. It's a pleasure for me to be here and attend you and speaking. I am Palestinian, and I'm white, I hope. So my question is, it's actually a highlight. I'm an actor also. Since Hollywood is a pioneer in creating new phrases and new ideas, programming the culture, minds, etc. One phrase I want to highlight, which has been always said, and I always stop and have a question about it, which is the phrase people of color. I don't know if there is a term or phrase that can replace that. Because it's this phrase itself is a bit, I don't know, it feels weird for me, from my perspective.
Yeah.
And thank you so much again.
Yeah. No, yeah, I mean, this is, I don't know, you know, I mean, again, one of the things that's been to talk about both of these comments, one of the things that's been so interesting about what has happened is that this has let loose a floodgate of, I don't know how to call it, of aggrievement. Women have talked to me in anger about why women's issues aren't being talked about more than people of color. You know, people of color is a phrase that bothers you. You know, you feel aggrieved. I feel aggrieved that that everyone is kind of importuning me about this issue. You know, it's so interesting. There is so, and it's not that people are making this up or that these are not real problems. It's just so interesting that this has kind of opened the spigot and everyone is upset. and not without reason, but it's just interesting. Again, that's why I think of it in revolutionary terms, because usually there's one small incident that happens that just lets everything out. I think this all started, I have a memory of Arab Spring starting in Tunisia with a fruit seller who set himself on fire. And everything that has happened in all these countries has kind of started from that. And it's just, again, as someone who loves history and studies history, it fascinates me the way these small things lead to enormous changes.
I want to thank you for last year recommending Brooklyn, which you'd seen at Sundance, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I read the novel and loved it, and I thought the movie was really wonderfully done. Great acting, a wonderful story with real people. When I contrast that to the movies which have so many nominations, Revenant and Mad Max, I mean, I don't see myself in all that violence and all the explosions, but I did. I guess I am Irish, but I did see myself in the ordinary people. Is there ever a chance for a movie like that to win?
It's unlikely, as you know. I mean, this year, at any rate, I mean, I love Brooklyn. I wish there were more films like it, but Brooklyn was a huge battle. Films like that getting made are enormous battles. I mean, the producers, I think there were something like 19 funding sources. I mean, they ended up, finally, they shot a lot of it in Canada, and Canada has such strict rules for giving funding that the director had to pick a Canadian DP. He had to pick a DP that he'd never met. Which usually directors and DPs are very close. He was forced to pick a Canadian DP for them to get funding to make the film. So films like that, I mean, the fact that this film got a best, I tend to look on the positive side. Ed is influencing me here. I'm looking on the positive side of things. The film got made. A lot of people saw it. It got 3 Oscars. It got a Best Picture nomination. So this film is doing, I'm happy for what it's done. This film could have disappeared. So I think we're lucky it was made, and we're lucky that it's out there doing well.
Just a point of clarification. You mentioned older actors were being pushed out of the academy.
Well, it's all across, it's all categories. It's not just actors.
But isn't it that ones that hadn't worked in X number of years?
Yeah. But I mean, again, it's always been that didn't matter.
But if an actor were 35 years old and hadn't worked in 10 years, of course, he probably wouldn't be in the academy, but I'm answering my own question here.
Well, also, it's 3, like I say, the rules are very complicated. It's like 3 different 10-year periods that, they've really tried to cover their bases as way as possible. It's not just not working in 10 years. It's more complicated than that.
Hello, right here.
Ah.
Hi. I'd like to know your view on the movie Straight Outta Compton in terms of its it being snubbed, obviously, by the Academy. And in contrast to that, on Friday night, the NAACP gave their Image Awards, and Straight Outta Compton was the best picture. So I'm curious about how does a movie like that touches nerves all over the place get nominated by the Academy just based on its actual, I'll say, art or whatever you want to call it around that?
Again, I can say this because I actually wrote this and I'm on record. I'm not a Straight Outta Compton fan. It didn't work for me. It's not, so... one of the things I think of is that, one of the things that bothered me about Straight Outta Compton, frankly, is its treatment of women. I think women are really treated badly in that film. One of the things I think about is that, there's a science, I know very little about science fiction, but I know there's this concept of alternate universes. And there's an alternate universe where Straight Outta Compton was nominated, and women are furious about its treatment of women, and they're saying a film that treats women this way should not be nominated. So, but we don't live in that universe, and in this universe, this is, people are upset that it wasn't a Best Picture nominee. I didn't like the film personally, so for me, it wasn't a problem that it wasn't nominated. But people love the film. A lot of my friends love the film. It's made an enormous amount of money. It's gotten a lot of, acclaim. It just didn't connect. I didn't connect to it. I couldn't tell you, No, the director's not nominated. The only people who are nominated are the only Straight Outta Compton nominees are the screenwriters.
I like to ask your opinion on a film that I don't think was nominated either, but had another incredible performance by a child actor, Beasts of No Nation, which
Yeah.
was so visceral. I had a hard time making it through that movie, and it was incredibly heartbreaking just because I know that kind of thing is happening in our country, in our world. So I just wondered what your thoughts
No, I
were.
love that child perform. That the young actor. I don't remember his name, but I thought Abraham Atta. Yeah, I thought that was a great performance. I thought that was the best thing about the film was his performance. I thought he was better than Idris Elba, and I'm a big Idris Elba fan. Again, they just, I don't know. Maybe the fact that Netflix, unlike Amazon, Netflix doesn't, just made a minimal theatrical release for that film. It made one of the world's tiniest amount of money in theaters. And maybe it just didn't penetrate the consciousness of Academy voters the way it would have if it would have had a stronger release. I don't know why, but I think his performance for sure was wonderful.
Could you please give me your impressions of 45 Years, which I think was the most nuanced film of the year?
Oh, I'm a big fan of 45 Years. I really loved it. If you don't, again, how many people, show of hands, how many people have seen it? This is why this is a great audience. No, it's one of the best films of the year for me. It's Tom Courtenay, Charlotte Rampling, a couple who've been married for 45 years, and then something happens, but something very interesting and unusual happens. I like that film a lot. I thought the performances were great. Again, one of the things I've read that the director said that one of the reasons that the film, first of all, they shot it in sequence, and the closing scenes in the film are very emotional. And, Charlotte Rampling has said, I don't know that I could have gotten to these scenes unless, the whole film had built up to it. And also, if you haven't seen it or if you see it again, it's something I hadn't noticed until I read about it. The director shot a lot of most of the film is these two women, a husband and wife, and he shoots it as a two-shot. There's not cut from one to the other. They react to each other within the scene. You see them both within the scene. And again, the actors said that they felt that enhanced, the playing together because they knew he was doing that. They weren't like, usually you have close-ups of one, close-ups of the other. When people are in conversation, you go back and forth. It's not shot that way. They're both looking at each other when they're talking to each other. And that adds also, I think, an extra kind of layer of emotional involvement. So I think it's a terrific film, and that's one that I would, recommend, unhesitatingly. And she got nominated, so it's a good thing.
I'm interested in your thoughts about what accounts for the popularity of Spotlight, because it's clearly really powerful material, but as a narrative, it's really linear and without reversal, as far as I could tell. So I just was wondering why you think it works.
Well, I think its virtues are its defects. Its virtues are kind of one of the reasons people are not that excited. It's a very old-fashioned film. It's classic old-fashioned movie making, But it's for me, it's very involving. It's not surprising. It's an interesting contrast to The Big Short, which is completely off the wall and, breaks the fourth wall and does all kinds of crazy things. This is very old school, very square filmmaking. But it's a powerful story. It's very well acted. It's that kind of filmmaking as good as it can be. But it's not The Big Short. It's not, Selena Gomez talking about, convertible debentures. But I liked it, but I understand people who say, there's just not a lot, you have to really love those old-fashioned virtues to really have it work for you.
I'd be interested in your comments on the documentary category.
Yes, that's one reason I brought this, because I'm always forgetting the names of documentaries. I love that. This year, I just want some of most of the nominated ones I really liked. Amy, the Amy Winehouse film, is just a heartbreaking film. It's a really inside story of this woman's career. The filmmaker, Asif Kapadia, did a film a couple years ago that I really like called Senna, about a Formula One driver, and he uses the same technique. He doesn't have talking heads in the conventional way we see them in documentaries like that, where you see the person talking. He interviewed a lot of people about Amy, but you just hear them. All you see is like newsreel footage, home movie footage, and when he interviews people, their voices are over this other footage. So visually, You're always in the time frame of the film. Nothing takes you out of it, and that really kind of pulls you in more and makes the films more involving. And Amy Winehouse's story is just heartbreaking. I mean, even, you kind of know it anyway, but to see it and to see what the people in her life were really like is really heartbreaking. There's a film that didn't get nominated that I want to mention called Listen to Me, Marlon. It's a documentary about Marlon Brando. Marlon Brando, unbeknownst to almost everyone, recorded himself constantly over the decades of his life. And the filmmakers got use of this material, these tape recordings, and they also did a lot of digging in archives, a lot of early footage of Brando, TV interviews of Brando. You just see Brando in a way, really in a way the way he thought of himself. It's a very moving film. Also, Cartel Land is nominated. It's an excellent film on kind of the craziness that's going on with the drug war in Mexico. There's always a lot of really good documentaries, but I think those three are good.
Thank you for coming here. I love movies, and I really have
Good.
enormous respect for your insights and your reviews and coming here. Talk about diversity a little. They say the movie studios aren't diverse enough, the Academy is not diverse enough. In your estimate, is there a diversity among film critics?
It's a good question.
How does...
There could be, there always can be more diversity, even among critics.
How does that...
What we hear? I feel about critics the same thing I feel about everything else. The more points of view because criticism is extremely personal. And the more people you have from different backgrounds, different ages, different socioeconomic stratas, basically, the more interesting it is. So I would love to see more diversity. But again, I'm only responsible for me. I am not a hirer of film critics, I teach film criticism at USC, and one of the reasons I teach it is to try and encourage the people who come there to be critics. So I would love to see more diversity,
Over in the back, please.
Could you comment on the foreign film nominees and also maybe contrast between the Golden Globe nominees and the Oscars? Possibly.
Well, let me deal with the Golden Globes first. I have taken a solemn blood oath never to take the Golden Globes seriously. I know it's a very, you could write a book, and probably someone will write a book on the rise of the Golden Globes and why they are now such a prominent organization. But I just don't take them seriously. They can sue me if they want to, So I will not comment on their choices. I don't remember them, and I won't comment on them. Even if I did remember them, I wouldn't comment on them. Let me look and see well, I know Son of Saul is probably one of the favorites. It's a very unusual film. It's a Holocaust film, but it's different than the Holocaust films you've seen before. And really, I could tell you what the storyline is, but the storyline is almost irrelevant. The reason it's such a striking film is its recreation of Auschwitz, the way it chooses to show it to you, the way the camera work is. It's quite powerful. It's quite unusual. And I think that's probably my favorite. The other favorite is a film that everyone loves that I have not caught up with yet, which is called Mustang. People love this film, and I just, it's on the top of my list. I just haven't gotten to it yet, but I hear it's quite a remarkable film. I just saw one of the other nominees, A War, which is a Danish film, very powerful, again, kind of, classic kind of storytelling type film about a Danish army officer serving in Afghanistan and what happens to him there. Very powerful, emotional stuff. It's another film that I'm going to see next week that's set in South America, which I haven't seen yet. And the fifth film, I think, is Thebe, which is, haven't seen that one either. But, Mustang and Son of Saul look to be the two favorites.
Well, I was going to ask you about Thebe, so I'll just pass the microphone.
I've heard the long tail of the diversity issue is that the overseas sales, and that they perpetuate white actors mostly because of foreign sales. Can you speak to that?
Well, I mean, I think that's one of the justifications that, again, what happens with the studios is that the studios, they're under pressure. The people who run studios are under pressure from the people who own these conglomerates that they're part of to make as much money as possible. And the conventional wisdom is that films like that, films with, black actors, Asian actors, whatever, don't make money overseas. I don't really know if that's true or not, but Hollywood is ruled by conventional wisdom, and people believe that, and so that's what happens. And also, these things, these issues, when you think about them, get so complex. I mean, there were years when people said, well, we just need women in power, and then we'll have more women doing things. Well, now there have been women in power in studios, and they're not necessarily doing that. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. I mean, people are complicated, and it's just looking for simple answers is not going to go anywhere.
Okay, as with last year, looking ahead, what did you really like at Sundance?
Well, there's one film I really liked at Sundance that I want to mention. It's called Manchester by the Sea. There's a writer-director named Kenneth Lonergan. About 12 years ago, he did a film called You Can Count on Me, which was a really wonderful film with, I think, Mark Ruffalo and Laura Linney. Is that who was in it? Really, it's a spectacular film. Then he spent years, again, this is a film I haven't seen, but he spent years and years working on a film called Margaret. He got into terrible battles with people in it. He had a version. The financiers had a version. Both versions ended up coming out. It kind of ate up years of his life. And now he finally has a third film. It's called Margaret by the Sea. It stars Casey Affleck. It's just Manchester by the Sea. I'm saying Margaret too much. I don't want to say too much about it because it's best experienced, but it's one of these films that you feel like you're watching life unfold in front of you. It's got remarkable performances. It's in some ways a tragic story, but it's got moments of real out-and-out humor in it. It's got spectacular acting, not only Casey Affleck. Michelle Williams has a wonderful, wonderful supporting role as his estranged wife. It's just, this is one to really put on your list. It'll probably won't come out till the fall. But this is the one to watch out for. Birth of a Nation is a problematic film. I mean, there are wonderful things about it. There are things about it that are not wonderful. It's like, for my money, Manchester by the Sea is a more satisfying experience.
Am I the only one who thought Truth was a wonderful film and it got no recognition whatsoever? Am I the only one?
Probably not the only one, but I don't know. I thought Truth was, it just didn't, I thought this is the Cate Blanchett movie, right? It just didn't catch fire with people. I thought she was amazing. I thought it was a great performance by her. It's too bad. Again, she had 2 films in 1 year, and her work in Carol overshadowed Truth. But I just didn't get enough out of Truth. I don't know. It just didn't ignite for me.
Since I believe the industry panders mostly to teenagers, don't they? Isn't it more projected towards teenagers
Well, at this
maybe
point,
to 30? How important is the Academy and the winners for the studios financially?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, financially, really not at all. Their money comes from other things, and I think really more than in this day and age, the teenage audience appears to be going away. They're not as reliable as they used to be. Really, it's the overseas audience that I think the studios think about more than teenagers, and it's not clear that they think that the overseas audience is more sophisticated than teenagers. It hasn't really changed what they do. But everyone, they like prestige. They'd like to, they'd like to have it all. They'd like to win Oscars and make billions of dollars. Probably if they had to choose, they'd prefer to make billions of dollars. Yeah. The Oscars? No. No.
And here, yes.
Yeah, Ken, I have a number of serious questions to ask, but I won't. Actually, I just want to know about the bear in Revenant. was that pure CGI, or was it? It seemed it was so utterly real, and it's kind of the coolest thing in the movie. But just in terms of how that was technically done.
They have been very closed-mouthed about this. Actually, there's a piece in this week's Hollywood Reporter that goes into some detail. Now that the awards season is coming up, and the people who create the bear is mostly, I don't know what percentage, but definitely mostly CGI. There may be a little bit of stunt work involved in part of it, but it's basically CGI. And there's a piece in the Hollywood Reporter that goes into some detail about it. It is amazing what they can do with CGI. I mean, if you see the film, you even if you know that it's not a real bear, you're going to think it's a real bear. It's just amazing what they can do. But it is not. There used to be a great bear actor named Bart the Bear. I'm not making this up. He was in that film with Anthony Hopkins. He was like the go-to bear for Hollywood. And, as happens, he died, And then all of a sudden I read that there's a Bart 2 that they're trying to anoint. And, I was emailing with another film critic about this, and he said, well, maybe it's like Tibetan lamas. They just pass the mantle on to another bear. But this was CGI.
My question is, I've made an observation over the last 5 years of the quality of the movies and the innovation that they are. And it seemed like the pivotal point was when the independents were bought by the conglomerates. Do you have a comment about that?
Well, not all independents are owned by, there's some tiny independents that are not owned by anybody. Do you mean the studios bought by conglomerates?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like there was a point where all the studios went out and started buying these small independent companies. And it just seemed like, like Miramax was bought by Disney. Yeah. And it just seemed like the Weinsteins really, they were really thinking outside the box. And it seemed like ever since, and then a lot of people kind of followed them as a role model. And it just seemed like at that point, then with the films, those little independent companies being bought up, because they were making some money. It just seems like the quality of the movies and the innovation has changed.
Well, in fact, the reverse is happening now. The studios are just getting rid of a lot of those things. Disney doesn't own Miramax anymore, doesn't own Weinstein anymore. Warner Brothers had an independent label that's gone. Paramount had an independent label that's gone. Fox still has Fox Searchlight. Sony still has Sony Classics. But really, a lot of the independents now are really independent again. Places like Magnolia, A24, The Orchard, Bleecker Street. There's a lot of new young independents.
Last question.
Mr. Turan, I know you may have mentioned some, but what are your favorites of those top categories?
Well, if I tell you that I'm a big fan of Brooklyn, it won't come as any surprise. If I could make Brooklyn win Best Picture, I would do it, but I can't. That's my favorite. Really, that's the one that stands out for me. I'd really love to see Brooklyn win, but as I said, I'm happy it was nominated. With some films, it is an honor to be nominated. It's a cliche, but with a film like Brooklyn that really almost didn't get made, it's amazing that it's gotten that far.
Thank you, Ken Turan.
Thank you. Thank you.